Hi, this is Guy Barker here. I recently uploaded a blog at msn.com around how to customize the accessibility of Windows 8 apps, whether they're built with XAML or WinJS. So I thought I'd give a quick demonstration of some of the features that came out of that blog. So the first thing I'll do is start the narrator screen reader, which by default on a Surface can be started with a press of the Windows button and the volume up button.
Starting narrator.
Okay.
By XAML window. Focus on risk level.
I'm going to move my finger around the screen and hear what narrator tells me about the UI elements beneath my finger.
Ask her by XAML window. Ask her by button. Ask risk level slider at play it safe. Ask her by XAML. Safer. Ask her by image. Ask her riskier. Ask her by XAML window. Okay, so we can hear narrator talk about the things beneath my finger. Now, some of the things that you heard there were a result of the customization that I described in the blog. For example, adding a localized accessible name to the slider. I'll do that again. Risk level slider at play it safe.
Okay, and the interesting thing there is it said risk level slider and play it safe. And what that was the risk level was the name of the slider and play it safe was a friendly name associated with current value. And if you go to the blog, you can read all about how I did that. And here is the WinJS version. As I move around the screen again.
Her by image. Ask now. Risk level slider at fairly cautious. Double tap to increase value. Triple tap to decrease value. Okay. And if I actually use the app to get some advice, so let me move the slider up. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Okay, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Sounds pretty good to me. I will
ask now. Button. Double tap to activate.
I'll ask Herbie for some advice.
It's a long shot, but it just might work. Okay,
and we heard narrator announce the new text that appeared on the screen. So now I'm going to demonstrate some of the high contrast support in the app. So I'll go to the classic desktop. And here in the personalized CPL control panel, I pick one of the high contrast themes there, say high contrast number 1. Okay, and then I'll go back to the app. And there we have it. The text and the slider and the button all changed to be high contrast by default. I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. But I did add code to make sure a specific image was shown that's appropriate to this theme. And similarly, if you go back to the CPL and pick the high contrast white theme, and go back to the app, there we go. It respects that too. And we can do the same thing with the XAML version of the app, but it's important to remember that in Windows 8, a XAML app must be restarted after you've changed the high contrast theme in order to show all the appropriate high contrast colors. So it's important when building your app to consider a number of accessibility related settings. So if you go to the ease of access settings, we've already looked at high contrast. There's make everything on your screen bigger. This particular screen doesn't have a resolution which supports that setting, but I've run the apps on a monitor that does support it and verified that everything looked fine when that setting was turned on. And this is a very useful setting. It makes everything on the screen bigger, and you want to make sure that your UI either reflows or does whatever is appropriate given the change in size of things on the screen. Other things you might consider are the notification setting. This particular app doesn't present any transient UI, so if it did, I'd certainly want to take into account this setting for how long things should show on the screen before fading away. So other considerations would be is there anything I should do to account for my customers who are deaf? Well, in this particular case I present no audio at all, so that's not particularly interesting here. Another thing I should consider is whether I'm presenting any important information through the use of colour alone. And in fact I absolutely shouldn't do that, because that might render my app unusable to some of my customers who are colourblind. The classic thing there is when some green symbol turns red to indicate some alert, but that might be imperceivable to some of my customers. Next we move on to keyboard accessibility, which is a fundamental aspect to accessibility. And what I'll do first is demonstrate the narrator screen reader again, but this time controlling it through the keyboard rather than through touch. And I can start the narrator screen reader by pressing the Windows Enter key.
Starting narrator. Ask her by XAML window.
I will now tab around this app.
Risk level, slider and play it safe. Tooltip, play it safe. Ask her by. Risk level, ask her by.
Okay, and in fact there are only two focusable elements in this UI, that's the slider and the button. So I'll tap the slider again and then I'll use the arrow keys to change the value.
Risk level, fairly cautious. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Danger. Fairly cautious.
And now I will actually ask Herbie for some advice, so I'll tap to the button.
Ask her by.
And then press the space bar.
Space. Are you really prepared to be held accountable?
Okay. Now, a very important point here is that because you've built an app that's fully keyboard accessible, and in the case of this app I didn't actually have to do anything specifically myself to make that happen, it just happened for free, then it also means the app is accessible through an on-screen keyboard, which is absolutely necessary for somebody who can't use the physical keyboard. Now, I've brought up the Windows on-screen keyboard here, which supports something called scan mode, which is a way for a switch user, for example somebody who uses a head switch or a foot switch, to control an app through the on-screen keyboard. So what I'm going to do is use the app in scan mode, and I'm going to control it through the use of the space bar, which is why I've got the keyboard shown here, though as I say this is also fully accessible through somebody who uses a switch device. So first I'm going to change the current slider value. Okay, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Yeah, seems appropriate. So next I'll tab to the button. Okay, focuses on the button, and now I'll invoke the button. There we go. It's a long shot, but it just might work. Fair enough. Okay, so there we have the app being controlled through the on-screen keyboard, which, like I say, can be controlled through a switch device. And here we show the on-screen keyboard docked beneath the app rather than lying on top of it. If the vertical screen resolution of your device is tall enough, then the on-screen keyboard can dock beneath the app. So that means that there's no way the on-screen keyboard can lie over some part of the app's UI that you want to see. And again, I can control there. Now the advice is it'll probably be fine, stop worrying about it. Now another thing I'll show is the magnifier app that comes with Windows. I've changed the settings on the computer such that I can start magnify by doing Windows volume up. Okay, and it's zoomed in. I can pan around the app. Now I had to do nothing to make this work with magnifier. Magnifier works fine by default. And say I'm using the keyboard to control magnifier. I'll turn the magnifier on now with Windows Plus. Then I'll tab, and I've got the app set up to, sorry, I've got magnifier set up to track which control has focus. So the Ask Now button does, and the slider does. Interestingly, the slider has focus regardless of the value on the slider, so Magnify doesn't actually change its view based on the value change there. But if I want to see where the slider is, I can see it there. Okay, one more thing to demonstrate. The Ask Herbie app written in WinJS, running with a high contrast theme active and with narrator running.
Risk level, slider at nothing ventured, nothing gained, double tap to increase value, triple tap to decrease value. Danger.
Okay, the slider's now at danger level.
Risk level, Ask Now. Button, double tap to activate.
Here we go.
Stop procrastinating and get on with it.
Okay, wise words indeed. So there we have some of the accessibility related features in a WinJS app and a XAML app. If I get feedback over time on how I can improve the accessibility further, I will update the apps accordingly.